your lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ben Wilson. He does such amazing work here at VSiN every single time he joins me. He won such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Ben for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you, it typically is picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturdays. We had some bank shots, but we've got one game today, so it's pick and analysis on the lone game that we've got on this betting board as we do it, those bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. I really don't anticipate there being any changes, and it's very easy to go in Las Vegas rotation order when we've got one game. So let's dive in. This is 619-620. Cal State Northridge is on the road against Stanford. Stanford, a 16.5 point favorite. 164.5 to 165.5 is the total. I did set my total at a 161.5. I do like the under. Now with CSUN, this has been one of the most rapid-paced teams in all of college basketball. Currently, in terms of total possessions per game, they are 31st. And Stanford, they've actually slowed themselves down by an average of about 4 possessions per game in their last 3 games, but they're still right around about 119th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I just don't think that you're going to get a lot of second and third chances to score, mainly because Stanford has been doing such a great job on the defensive glass. 22.6% of opponents' missed shots result in an offensive rebound. That's 18th in the country. At CSUN, they're pretty solid on the defensive glass as well. 82nd in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and you got a Stanford team that has been neither here nor there with their offense at home. About 157th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in their home games, so I did set my line at a 13.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with CSUN, even though you do have, for the Stanford team, one of the most underrated freshmen in all of college basketball. Ibuka Okore, 22 points, 3 assists. He's been shooting about 32% from 3 with nearly 2 steals per game, and that's part of the thing with Stanford as well. This is a top 25 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so they've been able to do a nice job there, 19th to be exact. You've got Chisom Clara, Benny Gieler, who have been able to combine for about 26 points per game. They combine for about 4.5 assists, 3 steals, so good versatility between the two of them, and this team is not necessarily going to be one that is necessarily super duper imposing with their 2-point shooting defense. They're outside the top 175 with that regard, and I do think that that's going to help out a Northridge team, and typically they are one that likes to take a lot of shots from 3-point range, but they've been a little bit more, shall we say, consistent with trying to be able to drive the ball inside. They become a top 75 team with regards to their 2-point shot percentage this season, and this is a CSUN team that I do still think that they're going to be able to get a few second chances, despite the fact that Stanford has been doing such a great job with their overall defensive rebounding. As CSUN, if you take a look at percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound, this offense is right around about 159th in the country. In the road games, about 28% of their missed shots do become an offensive rebound. Now, they do hurt themselves a little bit with the 13.5 turnovers per game, but it's been getting cleaner and cleaner as the season goes along. And to their credit, Stanford, at home, they rebound about 31% of their misses as an offensive rebound, but I do think that a man that is going to really keep you lively for the CSUN team is Larry Hughes Jr. Yes, of relation to that, Larry Hughes, 18.5 points. He's been shooting 42% from 3 for a unit that has been outside the top 250 with their 3-point shooting percentage at 31.8%. That's why they're driving the ball a little bit more down low. Mohamed Fofana, though, 9.5 points, 7 boards. You've got Josiah Davis giving you 6 assists per game. Now, the 4.4 turnovers per game have been quite unsightly, and Josh O'Gara has been able to help out with 14 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. But for Davis, even though he did have that 7 turnover game against Sacramento State, things other than that, they've been getting a little bit cleaner, 4 turnovers or fewer in 4 out of the last 5 games. And then Alexander Smotrich does a nice job coming off the bench, giving you about 4.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. I do think that you're going to get quite a few turnovers in this game, and you do have a CSUN team that has been a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I'm not going to call them like a monstrous defense or anything like that, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold up defensively, and Stanford's main kryptonite has been being outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. That's not going to be unearthed quite as much, so I did set a total here of a 161.5. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under and the points with CSUN, and that'll wrap things up for the Saturday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Ben Wilson, does such amazing work here at VSiN. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, because you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, give you picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I will be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuts Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to be joined by this man as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does such a tremendous job with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Additionally, he's doing some tremendous work over at Underdog Fantasy as well, looking at college basketball, little college football, and so much more. And you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB. And Rob, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And we just kind of talked about it off air, but it's so nice to be talking about college basketball games again, because unfortunately, when you're talking about the academic calendar, the holiday season calendar, it doesn't always kind of bode well as being a complementary pairing for the college basketball that we know and love. So I'm very glad that we're actually talking about games being back on the calendar here.
I am right there with you. And when you take a look at this great sport of college basketball, how do you take a look at this next week or so? Because we're going to have a lot of big-time conference games that are going to be starting up, but we also have a lot of students off campus as well. So I think that makes the handicaps a little bit more tricky for this next week or two.
And what we've kind of seen over the years is that this time of year in particular, this kind of 2-week gap is very, very complimentary towards the underdogs. And notably the underdogs that maybe are kind of using this time off as like a little bit of a reset. You know, we're going to see a great game on Monday, for example, between Yale and Alabama. Yale hasn't played in like 2 weeks, and a lot of that comes down to how, you know, the Ivy League goes about scheduling their games. But a lot of teams are in the same boat where they might have already had, you know, 7 days, 10 days, 12 days off. This is kind of that first or second chapter, kind of in between point where a lot of teams do kind of use that as a refresher, as a getting better measuring stick. And a lot of these win-loss records that we see right now, I don't think are actually going to translate until how these teams actually perform on the court coming out of the break.
Yep, and I do think that it's going to be very interesting to see how these teams are going to be able to perform. And when it comes to the conference games as well, because you just mentioned a big-time non-conference game between Yale and Alabama, does that hold true as well? Because I do feel like conference games just have a little bit of a different tenor and a vibe, and as we know, the environments, the home crowds, not going to be quite as ruckus as they typically are in, say, late January, early February. But I think that these conference games are going to be coming up, especially on Sunday with the WCC games, are going to be some of the more interesting ones, especially with a place like Oregon State, for example, where it's hard to travel to.
Right. I don't think the home environments right now with the students off campus are as demonstrative as they will be, to your point, in January and February and March and down the line. At the same time, I think it does play a little bit more to the favor of the home team than, say, like a neutral floor environment at the Players Air tournament where there's nobody there. So it's kind of like one of those things that it is a little bit of a measuring stick or a gauge game by game. You know, how much of a turnout is there actually going to be? For example, I think of a school like or a program like Indiana, for example, where they are always going to fill out that assembly hall every single time, even when students aren't on campus, because it's just a basketball-centric state. I do think there's a lot of programs that kind of fall under that bill. Now, there's a lot of other programs that are in that middling point where the students being off campus and not having that energy in the building because of holiday travel is going to play really, really against that home team. And that's kind of where I think case by case, you have to evaluate all these a little bit different, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And I do think that it is going to be a little bit more unique in terms of these specific situations, because I take a look at a game on Sunday between Santa Clara and Oregon State, and I still award quite a bit of home court advantage to Oregon State just because it is really hard to be able to get out to Corvallis, because it is going to be just a little bit rough in general for Santa Clara to make that trip. Whereas a game like, for example, Pacific versus San Diego, Pacific is in the state of California. They're not necessarily traveling far, and San Diego, I don't think is going to be having themselves a sellout. There's a lot of things to do in San Diego rather than watch Toreros basketball, because it's 70 and sunny every single day out there in San Diego. Is that sort of the same sort of vibe that you have with some of these games, or do you look at things a bit differently?
I think a program like Oregon State, where the basketball side of things in terms of the fan investment really hasn't been there, I think that this time of year actually kind of knocks them down even a little bit more when you're talking about their home court edge. And when you're talking about that game in particular, that actually kind of feeds into one of my favorite angles, which is Santa Clara is coming off of a terrible loss against Loyola Chicago. Obviously, Loyola Chicago has been dealing with a lot of, I don't even know what you want to call it, turmoil in terms of dropping every single game.
They're not honoring Sister Jean very well this year.
Right. They're in a spot right now where they're already calling for the Valentine's, ahead to, get fired from that job. If it's December and you're already making those calls, I don't think the season's technically going as you might have wanted it to go. And so from that standpoint, I think you look at Santa Clara in kind of a bounce back spot with 8 days off. I think Santa Clara is very good. I think they have a point to prove, and that reset point for a lot of these really good teams. There's another one in San Francisco playing on Sunday as well. I think there's some really good spots right out the gate here on Sunday with a full slate of kind of those reset point angles.
Yep, exactly. And I do think that we are going to have a lot of fun to be taking a look at what we've all got with this slate. And we do have ourselves some very, very tight spreads, and we've got some very, very large ones as well. And then I think that this one is interesting as well with the Seattle Redhawks taking on San Francisco. They're essentially making their debut in the WCC. They started out being about a pick 'em. Now they're about a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite. How do you take a look at a game like Seattle versus San Francisco, where San Francisco had a little bit more fanfare coming into the season, but I haven't necessarily loved what I've seen out of San Francisco, and we know that with this Seattle bunch that the defense is always going to be there for them.
In Seattle, notably at home over the years, in kind of this cramped little arena, I don't think the fan turnout or students being off campus is going to affect it much, because I only think they fit in like 500 people. That thing is kind of what it looks like on the broadcast when you're watching those games. Now, at the same time, they've handled business at home, and maybe that just kind of speaks to their familiarity with kind of that cramped little vibe that they have going on. And clearly, obviously, when you're talking about big wins for the program, they're coming off a massive one against Washington 2 games ago. And so a lot of things are going right for Seattle. Now, sometimes when you're talking about that reset point, you don't want to have that reset. You're rolling along. You want everything to be going great. And so a 6-day layoff is almost like a shot in the gut. Like, you didn't want to get off the court. San Francisco, on the other hand, I think probably had that benefit of, hey, we are a talented team. We have a good coach. Let's get this kind of rejuvenation point going and go into the WCC playing really good basketball. And from that standpoint, catching 2 points, I think it's a shallow line, but I think a lot of people are going to read into that win-loss record for Seattle and mistakenly take a team that actually might be the inferior team laying those points. And for that reason, I actually think San Francisco is probably going to win this game.
And with the San Francisco team, I love what Mookie Cook has been able to bring to the table, and I think the big key for the Dons is just being able to straighten out that guard play just a little bit. That's going to be an interesting dynamic. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does a great job with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, and he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly in terms of games that we're going to be seeing beyond Sunday, we're going to be seeing more of those power conference teams getting back into the swing of things, and I'm very curious to see how the break does affect some of these these teams, because these teams like Michigan, Iowa State, Vanderbilt, these were teams that had so much momentum going into the break. They were looking like the top teams in all of college basketball. How do you take a look at the break? Do you think that it might take them a little bit of time to be able to find their sea legs, or do you think a lot of these teams are going to pick up right where they left off?
Well, I think there's a lot of different elements at play when you're talking about basketball and 5 players being on the court. It's a small roster size overall, and so a lot of things can change in just an instant with an injury, with somebody having personal things going on in the background, with also players getting better. And from that standpoint, when you're talking about programs that maybe have like a very, very good head coach, I think the good head coaching kind of shines this time of year because, there's going to be some teams like, say, for example, Xavier, that really didn't maybe get off to the best start that they would have hoped for in the Pitino era. But that's also a program that at 9-4, I think they're actually going to get better as the season goes on, kind of live up to the growth that they brought in Pitino to instill. And same thing goes with like a St. John's. If we're kind of sticking in the family, I also think that when you're looking across the board at maybe even like a Marquette, for example, at basement level value right now, I think against the spread, they are going to get incrementally better. Whether that saves their season, I tend to think it won't. But at the same time, from a betting standpoint, when spreads are at play, I think that Marquette, I think some of these teams that are kind of in the basement of their conferences right now, with, again, those really good head coaches, are the teams that you kind of want to buy into right now.
Yep, I think so as well. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what we get out of this game as well, because when it comes to coming off of a long break, typically the thing that I think is going to be most rusty is three-point shooting. And Northern Colorado and Colorado have been two very good three-point shooting teams. Right now we're seeing that total at a 158.5, with Colorado being a 14.5 point favorite. How do you take a look at this sort of a situation? Because I lean towards the points with Northern Colorado because they're the much better three-point shooting defense. And with Northern Colorado, I think that they're going to big time have something to prove in this game with, again, probably a less than full crowd for the Buffaloes.
Yeah, and obviously, I really do applaud Colorado's scheduling this year because, and really just every year, because they battle the teams that are in their state, regardless of it, being a mid-major versus high-major dynamic. They always decide to play these teams, and credit to the state of Colorado. There's a lot of really good mid-majors kind of floating in there over the years. And from Northern Colorado standpoint, when you're talking about the idea of playing up against a team like a Colorado, well, they've already taken on, credit to themselves as well. They've taken on a Texas Tech in the early goings just a couple games ago. They've also played in the state of Colorado as well by facing off against Air Force and dominating that game wire to wire. And so although Northern Colorado has a 9-3 record and kind of this mid-major billing, and a lot of people might not know a lot about them, I think they actually are going to have a shot to stay with Colorado in the first half. And if you were looking for a first half money line play, I actually tend to think it's going to be on that side of things. And to your point on that over-under of kind of being at the 158 mark, I think it's a justified number, and I would kind of look towards taking the over there as well.
Yep, I'm right there with you, because even if the three-point shooting is a little bit suspect, these are two teams that like to play up and down, and Northern Colorado, I think, is going to do a good job on the glass in that game as well. And is there anything else that you're going to be taking a look at for this Sunday, Rob, as we finally have more than one game on the board, so thank goodness gracious there, but anything that's really catching your attention?
Well, I think there's a lot of really good games that are across the board with some big spreads that I think are just kind of falsely placed for that specific game. And one that immediately jumps out to mind is George Mason taking on Penn. Penn is a very interesting team, obviously on the first year under Fran McCaffrey, and they have been hyper volatile, as one might expect under a Fran McCaffrey-led direction. And from that standpoint, when you see a line like an 18.5 floating out there, it's almost one of those that you want to say, hey, not only do I want to bet that the entire game spread, because there is a wider range when it comes to Penn basketball games, but also take a stab at that first half money line at a 9-1 payer. Like, there are certain dynamics at play in that game that can make it very, very weird. George Mason going into the break, playing really good basketball. How do they immediately come out of that game? And Penn, in kind of the early goings, playing really well against some higher level competition with a 6-6 record. How do they use that as kind of a leaping point for the rest of the season? I think that Penn could come out there and immediately just put George Mason in a very, very interesting position.
Yep, and I do think that it's going to be a lot of fun to see what Penn is able to do, because if they're not hitting their threes, then it can turn, shall we say, a little bit ugly for them. If they're hitting their threes, though, man, they've got themselves a shot, and that's what you get out of Fran McCaffrey's teams. They're either going to give you a good effort or it's not going to be so great. There's typically not a lot of in between, but what I do know is that we always get an amazing performance out of you, Rob. You do such an excellent job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it is always a blast talking hoops with you, my man, and I'm so glad that we have games back in our lives, and from here on out, we have no kind of dead points the rest of the way, so it's just going to be nonstop basketball every single night, and I'm looking forward to it. And for those who want to follow my bets on a nightly basis, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
It is always great to be able to have Rob aboard every single time he joins me. He lends such amazing insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Cusco Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does such an amazing job over at the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He does great work over at Underdog Fantasy as well. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving two bigger conference teams first, and then any games involving teams from these conferences are going to be at the bottom. That would be the Atlantic Sun, the Big South. You've got the MEAC, the SWAC, the Patriot League. If I haven't said so already, the Southland and the Northeast Conference as well. That should cover them all for today. So how about if we get things started? 7:21, 7:22 on the card. Louisiana Monroe is on the road against Kansas State. Kansas State 31.5 to 32.5 point favorites out on this game. It is 167.5, and I did set my line here at 30.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Louisiana Monroe. Is this Louisiana Monroe team good? No, they're outside the top 280 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're under the tutelage of Phil Cunningham, who used to be the coach over at Troy back in the day, but I do think that they do just enough to be able to hold in there. They've got a go-to scorer, Martavius Russell, who comes over from Mississippi State, 17 points per game. He's been able to shoot about 39% from three, and team as a whole, they shoot about 33.5% from three. That's right around about country average. You've got a bunch that is going to get plastered on the glass or well outside the top 300 with that regard. You've only got one player on the roster, by the way, who's been able to give you more than 4.1 rebounds per game. That'd be Lavelle Bradneau. He's been able to average about 13.5 points, just under 10 rebounds per game, and was a little bit banged up towards the beginning part of the season. 9+ rebounds in now each of the last 5 games. That helps the team out. He's undersized at 6'5", but they also don't have a Kansas State team that necessarily has a ton of size as well. And for Kansas State, this is one of the best three-point shooting teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. As a collective, 41.2%. That's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. And obviously, PJ Haggerty is your main man. 22.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, shoots 40% from three. And as a matter of fact, right now, each of your top 4 scorers for Kansas State shoot at least 40% for three, with Haggerty's 40% actually being the team low. Abdi Bashir has been your main three-point shooter at 49% with 13 points per game, but not a lot of rebounding, as Nate Johnson, who's a guard, is your top rebounder. 12.5 points, 5.3 rebounds per game. It is a Kansas State team as well outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and it is a team that sometimes they play a little bit too fast for their own good. With Kansas State, in terms of total possessions per game, they're up to 36th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a Monroe team that they're playing a little bit faster as well at about 107th, but I do think that the sloppiness and the turnovers is going to be able to get to both of these teams, and Kansas State has been a top 175 team in terms of generating turnovers as well, and with David Castillo out there giving you about 13.5 points per game, I think that Kansas State should be able to win this game convincingly, but I think that the number went a little bit too far. Semi-line at a 30.5, so take the points with Monroe, made it 12, 164.5, so you're at the 167 plus in on the under. 723, 724, it is Liberty Bibberty on the road against Florida National. Florida National, an underdog of 4.5 to 5 points in your total on this game, 147.5 to 148.5. I did set a total here of a 151.5. I do like the over. Now, Liberty is one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, 358th in the nation, but they're also a top 45 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They do a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, and they're a top 25 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, and you do have a Florida National team that is the exact opposite. Florida National right now 30th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so they're looking to really move it. And for Florida National, not necessarily playing the world's greatest defense, they're on 49th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You got a Liberty team that's more around about 177, so I do think that you're going to be able to get quite a few points. I do like the over, and with Florida National, they're always a team that gambles for turnovers. Year in and year out, top 45 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but with Liberty turning the ball over less than 9 times per game, and them just being so well-rounded with a guy in Zach Cleveland who stands like 6'7", 9.4 points, 9.5 boards, 7.9 assists per game. He does a great job of getting everyone else involved, as out of your top 4 scorers, 3 of them that made at least 1 3 for this Liberty team are shooting at least 41.5%, including Brett Decker, who continues to shoot 53.5% from three-point range. Is quite incredible. They were dealing with a little bit of an injury to Colin Porter just before the holiday, but he should be able to get to go in this one. He played in the last few games, 10.5 points. He's shooting over 41% from 3, and with Liberty, they're okay at being able to generate turnovers. They are a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and everyone thinks of the three-point shooting with Liberty. They're also a top 10 team in terms of their two-point shooting as well, and that's a big reason why I am going to be willing to lay the number here, as you've got a Florida National unit that in past years they have been really, really bad with their three-point shooting defense, quite a bit more respectable this year, right around about country average, and they themselves are a top 125 team with their three-point shooting percentage. They bring in the Cal State Bakersfield Meet Me Roadrunner transfer, and Corey Stevenson give you about 18 points, 6 boards, steal and a half, shooting 46% from 3, and Julian Mackey, who comes over from Houston Christian, has been able to shoot 42% from the outside, 14.5 points per game. I love their game, and even though he doesn't give you a lot of scoring, Eric Bami has been able to give you about a block and a half, 6.5 points per game, so he does give them a little bit more rough and tumble down low, but this is always a bunch that has a tough time on the glass, and right now they do rank outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, Liberty not a team that's really going to be hauling in there a lot of second and third chances. They are a team that ranks outside the top 275 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, so that's going to be one of those situations of something's got to give, but I do think that with this Liberty team, they're going to do a nice job being able to go bombs away from the outside. With this Liberty team, they themselves are a team that's been okay at being able to guard the three-point line, about 225th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you have a Florida National team that it's just been a little bit up and down for them, and I do think that with facing off against a little bit of a better three-point shooting team, that Liberty, they're just going to be able to execute really well on offense, find a way to be able to get the job done. I did set my line at a 151.5 with the total, like the over, and with Liberty, set them as a 7.5 point favorite, so willing to lay up to 7 with them. 725, 726 on the card. Cal State Fullerton is on the road against SMU. SMU a 20.5 to a 21 point favorite. 172.5 to a 173.5 is the total. Set a total here of a 174. I do like the over. You've got an SMU team that's just playing harebrained, very up-tempo, 19th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So these are guys that are really looking to move it. And if you look at their home games and their home games alone, that ascends back into the top 20 even further. And then you've got on the flip side a Fullerton team that last year they weren't really gunning it. They are up to 5th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Fullerton team that they're going to give up a lot of clean looks from three-point range. They are 300th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but I did set a line here of an 18. I'm going to be willing to take those points. This is a Fullerton team that's really not looking to bomb it from three-point range, and SMU's main forte on defense has been the opponent's three-point shooting percentage. They are 66th in the country. Teams are only shooting about 30.7% from the outside against them, but his team could be at a little bit more down low, even though you got some Yedaglu giving you 12 plus points, 107 plus rebounds per game. SMU right around about 167th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. And with this Fullerton team, they're really good at not allowing second and third chances. Top 30 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. And after last year, this team just turned the ball over left and right. They're not a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense. They're a top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball themselves, with having a pair of guys in Landon Seaman along with Josh Ward being able to combine for 29.5 points per game. In Seaman, he's been able to shoot 43% from three. That is the word C and then the word man, just to clarify there. But Jefferson De La Cruz Monegro, he's been able to do a nice job, give you about 13 points per contest. He's been rock solid there as well. Again, with this Fullerton team, they're going to get beat a little bit from the outside, but they've been a top 125 team in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage as well. And then with the Southern Methodist team, you've got Kevin Miller. I absolutely refuse to call him Boopy Miller because it feels a little bit ridiculous, but what has been ridiculous has been the amount of production that he's also been able to give you as well. 20.5 points, 6.5 assists, 2.3 steals. She's 43% from three. Jerome Pierre, one of the top scorers in all of college basketball last year, doing it again. 19.5 points, 5 boards. He's been shooting about 34% from three-point range. And BJ Edwards, 2.5 steals per contest. This is an SMU team that is solid at generating turnovers. A top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. SMU is pretty solid on the glass. They've been a top 150 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but they are outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They grab a lot of offensive rebounds for themselves, but they'll give their opponents a lot of second and third chances as well. I do think that that's going to keep this Cal State Fullerton team very lively, even though you don't necessarily have ideal size with Cal State Fullerton. You've got one guy that stands right around about 6'10" and Kendrick DeLuna, but he hasn't even given the team too much. He's only averaging like 4.5 points, 3 rebounds per game, but I do think that for Fullerton, they're going to not give up a lot of second and third chances. They're going to be able to pile drive the ball inside, and I do think they give very much an up and down game in this one. Semi-line at 18, we'll take the points with Fullerton, and I'm in on the over. Semi-total 174, 727, 728 on the card. Northern Colorado is on the road. They're facing off against Colorado. Colorado is a 14.5 point favorite. 158.5 is the total. Set a total here of a 162.5. I do like the over. Neither of these teams are necessarily playing at warp speed, but both of these teams are playing quite a bit up tempo. You've got a Northern Colorado team that is about 72nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Colorado more around about 118th, and the forte of Colorado, three-point shooting. This team is shooting over 37% from three. They are 24th in all of college basketball with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. Northern Colorado in a road/court environment, 34.4% from three. That is a top 110 mark in all of college basketball, and for Northern Colorado, it has been incredible what we've seen out of these guys that have been in the program for a few years, mainly the Idaho transfer and Quinn Danker, 17.5 points. He's doling out 6.1 assists, only about 2.2 turnovers per game, and for Northern Colorado, 11.5 turnovers per game, considering their tempo is pretty solid. Now, they are not going to be forcing the issue at all on defense. Northern Colorado, about 360th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Colorado only about 270th, so should get good, clean possessions out of both of these teams, and Northern Colorado has been very good at being able to guard the arc, so while you've got a good three-point shooting team with this Buffalo's bunch, you do have a Northern Colorado team that is 19th in terms of three-point shooting percentage away from home. In a roadside-court environment, teams are only shooting 27.8% from the outside, and have ideal size with Brock Wisney along with Zach Block, who will be able to combine for 31 points per game. Between the two of them, you get about 9.5 boards, and both give you a darn near 3 assists per game. Block throws in there a steal and a half per game and shoots 52% from three. Wisney shoots about 42.5% from three-point range, and I know you've dealt with a little bit of injury to Danker. Should be good to go in this game, but that said, you've got Egan Shields, who's been able to step up in the interim, 8 points, 6 boards, not a guy that's really going to pop it from three-point range, but you get a little bit of facilitation out of he and Vincent Delano, and for Colorado, you've been able to have an incredible freshman come off the bench and just be able to log for the team nearly 15 points per game in Isaiah Johnson. He's been able to shoot 44% from three-point range. Barrington Argris right now shooting 62.5% from three. I think that you see a little bit of regression there. And while Colorado has been a very good three-point shooting team, they don't necessarily attempt a lot of threes. They're a top 40 team in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the three-point line. Colorado, a pretty solid team on the defensive glass. Top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, outside the top 180 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, and they do allow a lot of open looks from three-point range. Colorado right now allowing teams to shoot over 37% from three-point range, outside the top 325 nationally, and with them not really generating a lot of turnovers. Northern Colorado being a top 100 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. I do think that Northern Colorado matches up quite well in this matchup. I think that they hold in there. Going semi-line at an 8.5, and Northern Colorado used the elevation with being within the state, so like the points, and set a total of 162.5. I'm also in on the over. 729, 730 on the card. Portland plays host to Washington State. Washington State is a road favorite here of 4.5 points. 151.5 is your total, and I set a total here of 159.5. I do like the over. Portland, 41st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So these guys are very much looking to gun it. It's a Portland team that they aren't necessarily the world's greatest in terms of guarding things inside. Portland about 250th in the country with regards to their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but they've actually been one of the more efficient teams inside the 3-point line in all of college basketball. Portland 48th in the country with their 2-point shooting percentage. That goes all the way up to 61.8% at home. That's one of the better marks that you're going to find in all of college basketball. That's actually a top 50 mark, so you do like to be able to see that. And for Washington State, this is not a team that's really going to be pressing the issue. With Washington State, they are about 301st in the country in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis, and that's a big kryptonite for Portland. Over 15 turnovers per game, outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. And Washington State, they themselves have their turnover issues outside the top 275 in terms of taking care of the ball. Portland, respectable in terms of generating turnovers, top 125 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis. And Washington State as well, pretty good inside. They're a top 70 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Ace glass, break glass in case of emergency. He's been able to give you 16 points and shoot about 40% from 3-point range. Their main facilitator is not even necessarily a great scorer for this team, as you've had Jerron Morton come over from Morehead State. He's been able to supply about 3 assists, only about 6.2 points per game. You look for him to be able to give you a little bit more, but Emil Yoho has been able to give you about 10 points, 6 boards. He's shooting 43.5% from 3-point range. Emmanuel Ugbo, who began his career, if I'm not mistaken, over at Boise State, only about 3.5 rebounds per game, but 8 points per contest. And even though you don't necessarily have that flashy rebounder right now for Washington State, they've been a top 20 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They don't give you a lot of second and third chances, but they are outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Teams are shooting over 34% from 3-point range against them. And for Portland, it's been mostly all about the freshmen being able to step up for the team, as you've been able to get about 13 points out of Joe Foxwell. He throws in there 4 boards, 7 assists, about 3.5 turnovers per game. Needs to clean up the turnovers, but does also shoot about 35% from 3. Makai Balu has been able to give you about 11.5 points. He shoots 40% from 3. Timo George, he doesn't really give you a lot from the outside, but 12.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. This has been a Portland squad that has not really generated a lot of second and third chances for themselves, but they've just been able to hit those shots the first time around. And I do believe that with Washington State having similar turnover issues to Portland, and Washington State really not pressing the issue, that you get a lot of scoring in this game, despite the fact that Washington State has really sold themselves down. They're outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, but set a line at the 3.5. So at 4+ taking those points with Portland, and I like the over semi-total at a 159.5. 731, 732 on the card. George Mason plays us to Penn, and the Quakers of Penn do find themselves as a underdog here of 15.5 points. So on this game, you're going to be finding it at a 148.5, and with this Penn bunch, I did set them as an underdog here of 15.5 points. So we're going to be waiting upon a little bit of line movement here. I'm seeing 1 or 2 straight 15s. I would be willing to lay the 15 with George Mason, as they continue to be just one of the most dominant defensive teams they're going to find in all of college basketball. George Mason last year was number 10 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I don't know if they're going to quite match up there. Right now they're about 47th, but they're probably not going to need to, because they've really been able to upgrade their 3-point shooting. For George Mason right now, they are ranking 51st in the country with their 3-point shooting percentage, strangely shooting 34.2% for 3-point range at home and 43.5% away from home, but they did a nice job bringing in their Presbyterian transfer in Corey Mincy, who's become their top scorer, 18 points, shooting 48.5% for 3 and 96.5% at the free throw line as a kicker as well. Throws in their 4 assists, 4 boards, a steal per contest for George Mason. They're not necessarily a team that's going to impose their will in terms of generating turnovers, but they're just solid all the way around, and they're not going to be allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. This is a George Mason team that is in the top 55 in terms of overall rebound percentage. Riley Allenpatch has been that main guy down low, 6.5 boards, 13 points per game, and he's actually the lone guy on the roster that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, with Emmanuel Kenga being your number 2 rebounder. He gives you about 4.5 boards and only 3.5 points per game, but for Penn, you don't necessarily have as much down low, but for Penn, they also have a former top 30 recruit in TJ Power. Just couldn't find minutes when he was over at Duke in Virginia. He's been able to log about 15.5 points, 8.5 boards. He's been able to unlock his potential, shooting 43.5% from 3-point range. It's been a team that's outside the top 175 in terms of ball security, and this is a team that is coached up by Fran McCaffrey, so you know that the defense is going to be a little bit suspect, but you know that the offense is very much going to be there as well with this Penn team. Right now, they are shooting as a collective about 39.5% from three-point range in games played away from home. That is a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that there might be a little bit of regression there, but so you've been able to have Ethan Roberts when he's been out there and active being able to give you about 18 points per game. Now with Roberts, he's dealt with an injury since early December, and if he does play in this game, he is not going to be 100%, so that has been thrown into the handicap here. But I mean, even with him out of the fold, you've got someone like a Michael Zanoni who's been able to shoot about 37.5% from three, 10.5 points per game. And with Penn, this has been a unit that has been actually relatively okay at being able to guard the three-point line. They're getting plastered down low. They're outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they're allowing teams to shoot as a collective only about 32% from three-point range, which I recognize isn't necessarily amazing, but it's far from bad. Overall, Penn is about 239th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and with this George Mason team, they're never going to be a super-duper up-tempo team. As a matter of fact, with George Mason, in terms of total possessions per game, 295th. So this is a total that I did set at a 145.5. Do think that George Mason sees a bit of regression with that three-point shooting, so one to lay up to 15 with George Mason, and I'm going to be in on the under. 733, 734 on the card. Old Dominion is on the road against Maryland, and Maryland does find themselves as 12.5 to 14-point favorites. So this game is 152 to 152.5, and set a total here of a 143.5. I do like the under for Old Dominion. This team has had a tough time scoring, and really both of these teams have had a little bit of a tough time with their offense with Old Dominion. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they are 234th. Meanwhile, for Maryland, 178th, and while Maryland is 84th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, they've really slowed down recently. They've been playing at a rate of about 4 possessions per game fewer in their last 3 games, and a lot of the reason why they have changed their tempo a little bit more is that now they're finally getting guys healthy. Solomon Washington was one of the main guys that followed Buzz Williams on over from Texas A&M. He's a good rebounder, and in the games that he's played, 7.5 points, 7.3 rebounds per game. He's only been out there for 4 games, so that makes sense as to why you've seen a tempo change. Miles Rice, who's a rock-solid guard that comes over from Indiana, 9 points, pair of assists, a little bit of a steal per game. Right now, shooting 47% from 3. We'll see a little bit of regression there, but he missed 4 games earlier in the season as well. And I do think that Maryland, who's right now allowing teams to shoot 38.5% from three-point range, we're going to see a little bit of regression there. And this is an Old Dominion team that last year they were one of the most putrid three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Bit improved at about 33%. They're still about 225th in the country, and they're doing an okay job of guarding the three-point line. Top 125 team with that regard. But last year, Old Dominion was one of the best teams in terms of rebounding in all of college basketball. Right now, they are outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. So if Caleb Swan, Roger, ironically enough, is a former Maryland big man, 7 points, 5 boards, a little bit of a block per contest. He's been able to give you a bit of something, but I mean, other than he, the only other guy that really gives you over 4 rebounds per game is Jordan Battle, who's been battling to be able to give you 14 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists. And then you've got Casey Shaw, who comes on over from Maryland Eastern Shore. When he's been out there, he's been rock solid. He's been able to supply the team with 16 points per game and missed quite a bit of time towards the month of November, but has been able to score 14 plus points in each of the last 4 games since coming off of injury. So he's been able to elevate this team a little bit, and it feels like the defense has been actually a little bit better ever since Shaw's return as well, because he's not a guy that's going to light you up from three-point range whatsoever, but he's a guy that's going to be able to guard multiple positions, has good shiftiness. And for Old Dominion last year, Robert Davis gave the team 15 plus points per game. We've seen him fall off a little bit to about 9 points per contest, and do think that with Maryland, you've got a little bit of upside with the freshman and Darius Adams being able to supply about 12 points per game. And David Hewitt was once a 20-point per game scorer over at Northern Illinois. He's been able to give you about 15 points per game. Do you think that for Maryland, a team that is a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Old Dominion about 195th in terms of turnovers per possession away from home, I do think that Maryland rounds into form a little bit more with their defense, and I do think that the turnover battle is going to greatly hurt Old Dominion in this one. So I did set Maryland as a 15.5 point favorite here, especially at the 12.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Maryland, and I'm in on the under semi-total 143.5. 735, 736 on the card. It is Santa Clara on the road against Oregon State. Oregon State is a underdog at home of 6.5 points. So on this game between 151 to 153.5. And I do like the under at semi-total at a 151.5. So especially those 152.5s, 153.5s, as both of these teams slowing down a little bit. Santa Clara 207th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Oregon State all the way down to 266th. But I'm willing to take the points with Oregon State. It's very tough to be able to travel to Corvallis. Recognize that the home crowd might not be as ruckus as it typically is is, but going to my line at 3.5, Santa Clara has been much better at generating turnovers than in the past, 63rd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but the overall guard play is down as well. This team is only shooting 31.3% from 3 outside the top 260 in all of college basketball in that regard, but this has been a squad as well that has been able to get quite a bit out of Christian Hammond, who's been supplying 17 points, 2.5 assists, a little bit of a steal per game. I like what Buki Oboye, along with Elijah Bai, have been able to bring to the table. Oboye is able to give you about a block and a half, shoots 37.5% from 3 when he actually shoots them, and Mai shoots 36% from the outside, 14.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, and by committee, Santa Clara has been really good in terms of giving themselves second chances. Top 25 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but you do have some little bit of rough home and road splits with regards to the Santa Clara team, and this is an Oregon State team that they're much more at home with their three-point shooting. At home, they shoot 36% from three-point range. On the road, they shoot about 31% from the outside, and one of the upside guys is Malcolm Christie. Had a little bit of a slow start to the season. He's only averaging about 5.3 points per game, but hit some nice shots against Cal Baptist. He was able to put up a few points in that one. He had 12 points against Vermont. Has been a little bit silent here in the last few games, but I think that he's going to be able to find a little bit of a role in this one. You've got Des White and Josiah Lake, your main two scorers, combining for about 24.5 points per game, with White shooting about 36% from three-point range. Oregon State has been a little bit rough in terms of ball control battle. They're outside the top 250 in terms of ball security. They turn the ball over 13 times per game while being a low-tempo team, about 96th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so they're looking to play slow and controlled. That said, this is an Oregon State team that's in the top 100 in terms of free throw attempts per possession, and they shoot 78% at the charity stripe, so they make the most out of that. Now, Oregon State has really been getting plastered on glass as well. They're outside the top 225 with regards to rebound percentage. You've got Noah Ammenhauser as a true sum footer that's only give you about 3 rebounds per game. As a matter of fact, guard Josiah Lake is one of just 2 guys on the roster giving you over 3.2 rebounds per game. The other is Jonan Mooch, who's been able to give you about 7.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Yak has been dealing with an injury, and that's a great name, by the way, but I do think that Oregon State is going to be able to hold up here. They've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. You do have a Santa Clara team that, while they've been able to do a very good job in terms of hitting the glass, this is a team that is going to put you on the free throw line as well, outside the top 225 in terms of free throws allowed on a per possession basis, and with that fall off in terms of their three-point shooting, and this being a Santa Clara team that as well is outside the top 180 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, I think that does just enough for this Oregon State team to hold in there in a little bit of a lower possession game. I set my line at a 151.5 with regards to total, like the under, and I'm going to take 4+ here with Oregon State. 737, 738 on the card. It is Pacific, and let me be specific, they're on the road against San Diego, and San Diego is indeed a home underdog. You're going to be catching with them anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5 points. 148.5 is the total, and I set my line at 3.5. So one to lay up to 3 with Pacific. Pacific has really slowed down their tempo this season. In terms of total possessions per game, they're all the way down to right around about 271st. Meanwhile, you've got a San Diego team that they're not really fast. They're about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Neither here nor there. They just have not been a very efficient defense. 269th, very nice in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Pacific actually 108th in the country. And for this Pacific team, you just have really a whole is greater than some of its parts approach. Like, I was really thinking that the Lamar transfer and Alexis Marmoyoles was going to have a big role. He's only given the team 5 points per game, but you've had Elias Rolfe, the main holdover from last year, at 6'7", supply it all, 17 points, 6 boards, a steal, shoot 41% from 3. Pacific, country average team at about 33.8% from the outside, but they're just doing a great job on the glass. This is a top 75 team in terms of rebound percentage. Now, Pacific outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. They're turning the ball over 13 times per game, but you have a San Diego team that's really not going to be forcing the issue with that regard. This is a San Diego team that is just getting absolutely dump trucked on the glass. Right now for San Diego, they do find themselves outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage. Now, you do have a trio of double-figure scorers in Tyler Johnson, Tunari Lane, and Juan Sebastian Goracito, who have been able to combine for about 34 points per game. In Goracito and Lane combined shoot 39% from three-point range, while Johnson 2 steals, 3.7 assists per contest. So they've been able to do a relatively quality job there, but when you're losing the rebound battle the way that they are, and for San Diego, they just don't generate the same amount of turnovers away from home as they do at home. That's a little bit of an issue, and outside the top 300 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, this is a Pacific team that is very content with being able to pile drive the ball inside. They're a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from two-point range. You've got Gene Clean, who comes over from Maine. He's been a nice facilitator, 5.5 assists to 2.5 turnovers to 8 points per game. Not a guy that really shoots it from 3, but he's thrilled to get the ball to Isaac Jack, who's shooting 77% from the floor, 9.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. I do think that this Pacific team is going to be able to win from within, and I think think that San Diego continued to be inefficient with regards to their defense, but I think that's going to be more of the 2-point variety that kills them, and that does just enough to be able to keep this total under. Semi-total 147.5, so you're at a 140 plus in on the under, and a multiple up to 3 with Pacific, 739, 740 on the card. Loyola Marymount, they play us to St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a 8 to 8.5 point road favorite. Total on this game, it is 137.5 to 138.5, and I did semi-total at a 135.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Now, both of these teams have been very good defensively. St. Mary's is currently 41st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Loyola Marymount is actually 30th, but when it comes to St. Mary's, this team just continues to dominate on the glass, currently 8th in the country in terms of rebound percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a bunch in Loyola Marymount, more around about 180th. And for Loyola Marymount, Jan Vide did return for a few games prior to the break, but that said, I believe that he was out for that game that they played against Morgan State as well. I think that he plays, but he certainly has been dealing with quite a bit of injury. He's been overall able to give you about 12 points, 5.5 assists per game, and this has become a little bit more of MJ Amy's team. 15 points, shoots 38% for 3, and then Rodney Hot Rod Brown is able to shoot 41% for 3. He gives you 14.5 points per game between Amy and Brown, about 4.2 assists per game. Jalen Shelley has stepped up as a little bit more of a facilitator when Vide has not been out there with about 3 assists per game, and for this Loyola Marymount team, they've been able to do a great job in terms of not allowing a lot of open looks from 3-point range. They've been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but this is a St. Mary's team that they themselves, that they're going to be rock solid defensively, especially down low, top 40 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, with Paulius Marsoukis being able to supply 18.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. It is a St. Mary's team that does have some big home and road splits with regards to their 3-point shooting as well. For St. Mary's, they shoot less than 27.5% from 3-point range away from home. Meanwhile, they're shooting just a hair above 40% from 3-point range at home, so they're going to need Mikey Lewis to be a little bit more consistent with that regard, but he's been able to give you 14 plus points per game. He's one of the better, in my opinion, just shooters in the non-power ranks in all of college basketball. He's been able to shoot darn near 40 plus percent from 3-point range overall for the season. Joshua Den, he only shoots about 31% from the outside, but he's done a nice job being able to supply this team with about 13 points per game, and then that those big men down low are just going to be able to eat on the glass. Andrew McKeever, 9.3 points, but more like 10 rebounds, a block per contest. You've got Harry Wessels, a true some footer, is able to give you about 5 rebounds per game as well. And with St. Mary's, not necessarily a team that's going to generate a lot of turnovers. Loyola Marymount has actually become a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I also think the way that St. Mary's has just done a great job of being able to hit their free throws. Currently, this team is a top 5 team in the country, shooting over 80% at the free throw line, and to the credit of Loyola Marymount, they're not a team that's like relentlessly fouling or anything like that. They're a top 150 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that that's going to play very big in this game, especially with St. Mary's having the edge on the glass that they do. So I set a line here of 11.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with St. Mary's, and I'm going to be in on this under as well. Semi-total at a 135.5. 741, 742 on the card. San Francisco is on the road against Seattle. Seattle finds themselves as a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Toss game between 141.5 to a 142.5, and I like Seattle in this spot. You were finding them as a slight underdog / a pick 'em a little bit before. Now the line has flipped a little bit, but I'd be willing to go up to 3 with this Seattle bunch because they just do a great job on the little things. For Seattle, they are right now shooting in the neighborhood of about 36.5 to 37% from 3-point range. They've been a top 125 team with that regard, and you've got a San Francisco team that has been shooting a relatively similar percentage as well. Right now for the Dons, they're shooting in the neighborhood of about 35.5 to 36% from 3-point range as well, but with San Francisco, they have seen a big giant drop with their 3-point shooting percentage away from home. They shoot about 39% at home, 32.9% away from home, and with the San Francisco team, they have to contend with a Seattle bunch as allowing teams to shoot just 29.5% from 3-point range, and Seattle being 45th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis compared to the Dons being 143rd. I think it's big in this spot for Seattle. I do think that there might be a little bit of regression with their overall 3-point shooting, as last year they were a bit rough with that regard, but Brayden Maldonado, when he's not trying to block shots with his shoe, he's been able to supply 16 points, shoots 98% of the free throw line, and about 45% from 3. John Suckio, Will Hembold, these two guys have had really good versatility, combined about 26 points per game. And Hembold, he's been able to supply about 3 blocks, 4.5 rebounds per game. It's not a Seattle team that's going to grab for themselves a lot of second and third chances, but they've been a top 125 team in terms of overall rebound percentage. And for San Francisco, Mookie Cook has been a really nice versatile piece for this team. 10.5 points, 5.5 boards, a little bit over 2 assists per game, and he shoots 43.5% from 3. David Fuchs dealt with a little bit of injury, but he's giving you 12.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. San Francisco, a little bit of better team on the offensive glass than Seattle, but a little bit lesser on the defensive glass. And for San Francisco, they've been very good down low, top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You're not going to have either of these teams really getting out of sorts either with regards to their tempo, especially San Francisco. It's currently 313th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Seattle's been a very mid-tempo team, about 156th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've been able to have some good facilitation with Malachi Arrington for Seattle, giving you over 4 assists per game. It's not necessarily been too much of a score thus far this season, but has done a nice job getting everyone else involved, and with John Christophilus taking on a little bit of a lesser role, Huron Don still give you some good block shots. I do think that Seattle, a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, finds a way to get the job done. Semi-line at 3.5, 1 to lay up to 3 with Seattle, like the under. Semi-total at a 139.5. This next game, the bookmakers just screwed up. 743, 744 is listed as Nebraska versus Oregon. Nebraska is actually Nebraska-Omaha that Oregon is going to be facing. They added that as 747, 748, so we'll let that game in a second. So for the moment, it's a skip. 745, 746, Gonzaga is on the road against Pepperdine, and the Waves of Pepperdine are a 27.5 to a 28.5 point home underdog. So on this game is 152.5, and I set my line at 25.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Pepperdine. They had a lot of changeover in the offseason, but you've got Danilo Dosic, who's the main returner from season ago, doing a nice job with his versatility. Saying 6'10", would like to see him rebound a little bit better, as right now he's only been able to give the team about 3 boards per contest, but throwing in there 12 points, he's able to shoot it at about 32% from 3-point range. This team has also been able to do a little bit of a better job on the defensive side of things than they have in past years as well. And you do have a good facilitator in Silas Phillips, who's been giving the team 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, 5.5 assists per game. Now, they're going to have a very tall task down low, with Graham Ike being able to give Gonzaga just under a double-double right now. And right now, the lone guy that is giving you over 6 rebounds per game is Phipps. So this is a bit of an undersized team, but Yatan Levy, who comes over from Turkey, spent a little bit of time over at UW Green Bay last season. He's got a bit of versatility at 6'8", able to shoot 37.5% from 3-point range. This Pepperdine team that's going to be very content to slow things down, while Gonzaga is looking to speed them up. Gonzaga 37th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pepperdine more around about 220th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But Pepperdine, a top 125 team in terms of keeping teams off the free throw line. They have been a top 125 team themselves in terms of their overall rebound percentage, and a top 200 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. A big issue that you've had with Pepperdine is taking care of the ball. This team has turned the ball over 13 plus times per game. That is outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. And this is a Gonzaga team that they're solid at generating turnovers, but that's not necessarily like their bread and butter. They're a top 75 team with this regard, but I mean, it's a Gonzaga team that all of a sudden is a top 15 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Teams are only shooting 28% from 3 against them, and they very much force teams to the outside. Gonzaga right now a top 25 team with regards to rebound percentage, because while you got Ike giving you 17 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, 3 other guys in Jalen Worley, Braden Huff, and Ty and Grant Foster, all between 4.8 and 5.3 rebounds per game. Huff has been able to huff and puff for 19 points per game, not necessarily shooting it well from 3, and of your top 3 scores for Gonzaga, nobody's shooting over 30.5% from 3, but the ancillary guys like Seal Venter shoots 43% from 3, Adam Miller shoots 39% from 3-point range, even someone like Davis Vogel, whenever he's gotten minutes, he's been able to slide the team with 7 points per contest. He has shot it well from 3-point range. Gonzaga continues to be a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This is a Gonzaga team that very clearly outclasses Pepperdine. That said, I do think that this number has just gone a little bit too far. Gonzaga is going to be looking to pile drive the ball inside, and Pepperdine, they've been able to do an okay job with that interior defense. I think that they do just enough to be able to hold in there. And I do think that the Gonzaga defense is still very underrated, and it's still one of the better groups in all of college basketball. So set a total of 151.5 here at the 152.5, like the under, and I'm going to take 26 plus here with Pepperdine. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game. 747, 748. Omaha is on the road against Oregon. Oregon is a 19.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 151.5 to a 152.5, and with Oregon, I set them as a 19.5 point favorite. So now that we're getting in some places 20 to 20.5, I'm willing to take the points with Omaha. This is an Omaha team that was really good with their 3-point shooting a season ago, and it took them a little bit of a time to be able to find their footing with their 3-point shooting. It feels like that's been the exact same this year. Omaha right now shooting about 34.2% from the outside, about 157th in all of college basketball, but after a little bit of shaky start to the season, it's been able to be a little bit better. And for Oregon, outside the top 240 in terms of ball security, they're turning the ball over right around about 13 times per game. They've had a pedestrian 3-point shooting team, shooting about 33.8% from 3. That is about as country average as it gets. And for Omaha, they did lose a few key pieces from last year's team, but now you've got Lance Waddles, who's been able to give you 18 points, 5.5 boards. He's taken ownership of that main role. They don't have the same main rebounder from a season ago, Markel Sutton, so you don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 6 rebounds per game, but Tony Osborne has been able to supply the team with 14.5 points per game when he's been out there. He's been missing for a few games, so does Sean Glover, and his 11.5 points per game is going to need to help out a little bit, but Osborne did return in their last game against Lamar, had 8 points in 41 minutes there, so he should be all good to go in this game. And on the Oregon side of things, they've dealt with a few injuries as well, but I mean, pretty much all these guys are back. Like Jackson Shellset only missed one game due to injury. You've got a guy, Nate Biddle, who's got a lot of versatility, 15 points, 6.5 boards, but I mean, outside of what you've been able to get out of Biddle and KJ Evans has been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. It's been very hit or miss with regards to the interior offense of the team. Now, they do a nice job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. Oregon is a top 45 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but also outside the top 235 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. The turnovers have been quite a bit of an issue, and this Oregon team hovering right around about 200th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. So they've got a lot of issues on the interior, aside from the rebounding, which has actually been rock solid, and a lot of that falls on Sean Stewart, who comes on over from Ohio State. He's only given the team about 7.5 rebounds per game. And then in the backcourt, you've had TK Simpkins shoot about 42.5% from 3, 12.5 points per game. But other than that, Shellset, who's been able to give you 16 points, 5 assists, steal and a half per contest, doesn't have a lot of help. And Shellset, not necessarily the most amazing 3-point shooter at 32%. And with Oregon right now hovering about 184th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, that's a little bit of an issue, though. You do have an Omaha team that they themselves 296th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Gets a little bit better away from home. They're inside the top 270 away from home, but that said, I do think that Omaha going to do just enough to hold within this number. Did somebody total 155.5 with the, shall we say, suspect defense of Omaha, and I do think that Oregon finds a little bit more on offense, so like the over and the points here with Omaha, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-547, 306-548. Winthrop is on the road against Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a 17.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 164.5 to a 165.5, and with Winthrop, I did set them as an underdog of 16.5 points. So here at 17 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points. Texas Tech just has not been the same defensive team that we've seen in past years, even with having JT Toppin give you 20 plus points, 10 plus rebounds per game. He's been rock solid. This team has been a little bit soft on the interior, about a 168th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this Winthrop team, as is typically the case, they're leaving something to be desired defensively, 255th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but this is a team that's doing a nice job executing on offense, and Winthrop typically is an up-tempo team, and they're back to being about 75th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, fast but not warp speed, but I do think that Winthrop is going to be able to hold in there because of what you've been able to get out of the Duquesne transfer in Mr. Kareem Rozier. He's coming, giving the team 13 points, a little bit over 4 assists per game. He's shooting over 40% from 3, and Winthrop has always been a little bit of a hit or miss 3-point shooting team. Right now, they're shooting 37.1% from the outside, and last year they were atrocious with their free throw shooting. Now they're shooting about 74% at the free throw line, so they've been able to clean up a lot of that. Now, on the Texas Tech side of things, you've got a guard that when he's on in Christian Anderson, about 20 points, 7.3 assists per game. He's shooting about 43.5% for 3, but he's had a few games against better competition in which it's been a little bit suspect. Now, this isn't necessarily the world's greatest competition with regards to the defense. The offense of Winthrop is great. Winthrop is a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Offensively, they are certainly leaving a whole heck of a lot of something to be desired, and this is a Winthrop team that on the interior, they're only about 166th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, so that does leave a little bit of something to be desired, though Dallin Berry has been able to give the team double figures, and with this Winthrop team, I do think that they are going to be able to muster a lot of second and third chances as well in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Winthrop is a top 125 team with that regard. Meanwhile, Texas Tech, their main forte has been having Toppin grab those offensive rebounds, are 57th in the country with that regard, and Luwan Watts has helped out with that as well. 14.5 points, 2.5 assists, 6 boards. He shoots about 39.5% from 3, and they match Winthrop with their 37.2% 3-point shooting, but Texas Tech outside the top 250 in terms of generating turnovers. Now, Texas Tech, a top 40 team in terms of taking care of the ball as well, but they have been having themselves a little bit of a difficult time being able to guard the 3-point line. They're outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and I do think that that keeps Winthrop lively in this game, and I do think that Texas Tech is going to improve a little bit with regards to that defense. So I set my total at 162.5. I do like the under, but with Winthrop, I'm willing to take those points. Set them as a 16.5 point dog. 36.549, 36.550. North Florida is playing host to Columbia. Columbia is a 13.5 to a 14.5 point favorite. So on this game, it is 162.5, and set my line at 15.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it. The main issue that you do have with Columbia is turnovers. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, but this is a Columbia team that is a top 40 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage. They're doing a great job on the offensive glass. They're doing a great job on the defensive glass as well. And right now for North Florida, in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, 45%. They are allowing 45% of misses to result in an offensive rebound. For reference, last year, Prairie View A&M was the worst team in all of college basketball. They allowed 38% of opponents' misses to result in an offensive rebound. So Columbia should be able to win that battle there. This is a North Florida team that honestly is not the world's worst team at generating turnovers, but I mean, still, you've got a big giant divide there. It's a North Florida team that is right around about like 225th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you've got dueling styles here. This is a North Florida team that they always like to play quite fast, 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Columbia has become more of a mid-tempo team at about 215th, and you've got Cameron Oriole for this North Florida team, give you about 18.5 points. He shoots 44% from three-point range, and North Florida as a whole, they shoot 35% from three. They take over 50% of their shots from three-point range, so they're very much looking to bomb it there. But for this North Florida team, they also don't get to the free throw line. They're a bottom 30 team in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of their possessions that result in a free throw. Kent Jackson, Trey Caddy, these two guys have been able to combine for about 20 points per game, and Caddy has been able to shoot about 42% from three-point range. But on the flip side for Columbia, they are absolutely going to be able to dump truck on the glass. You've got Kenny Nolan, who's been really the lone double-figure scorer, 16.5 points, 3.8 assists per game. He has been rock solid, and you've dealt with a few injuries with this team, with Zanu Ndi Badri being out for like 7 or so games. But in the interim, 6'8" Blair Thompson has been able to give nice versatility, 9.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's shooting 45.5% from three-point range. Jared O'Keefe shoots 42% from the outside with about 9.5 points per game. And we've seen a little bit of a fall off with this three-point shooting of Columbia, but still, they're shooting as a collective in that neighborhood about 37% from three-point range. They've still been able to shoot it relatively well in road games as well. They're 25th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, and strangely, North Florida is shooting only about 33.5% from three at home compared to about 34.8% away from home. I think that Columbia is able to just own the glass, get a bunch of second and third chances, and North Florida is going to get plastered with that regard. I did set my total at a 161.5. I do think that you get enough turnovers to prevent the over, so in on the under and one to lay with Columbia. 3-6-5-51, 3-6-5-52. Moyne is on the road against Boston College. Boston College a 12.5 to a 13.5 point favorite. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total, and I did set a total of a 145. I'm going to be in on the under. We've got a Boston College team that's currently well outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and just frankly have not been able to shoot it well from three. 336th in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Moyne is actually shooting about 37.5% from three. That goes on to 35.8% away from home, but I mean, that's a top 45 mark in all of college basketball. I think that does enough to be able to keep them lively. I set my line at 13, so I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now with Moyne, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time down low, but they're a little bit better equipped this year than they have been in the past with regards to post play, with Shiloh Jackson coming over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, 14.5 points, 8.5 boards. He's been able to do a nice job in terms of giving you 2.3 blocks per contest as well. And then you've got some solid three-point shooting with Trent Mascara shooting 43% from three, 14.5 points per game. Dan Gehring shoots 35.7% from the outside. He's been able to supply the team with just under 13.5 points per game. Ja'Kai Sanders has been pretty solid as well. Now, this is a Moyne team that as well is getting just lambasted from three-point range. They're a bottom 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It seems they're shooting over 40% from the outside. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give, because the one thing Boston College has actually done a very good job of, they are not allowing good, clean looks from three-point range as well. Boston College is allowing teams to shoot less than 28% from three-point range. They've been a top 35 team in all of college basketball there, and they've been a solid two-point shooting defense as well. They're a top 50 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They just can't put the ball in the basket themselves. They're also outside the top 260 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage. Donald Hand is a little bit of a do-it-all guy that gives you 15 points, 5.5 boards, so he's been able to do an okay job there, but he shoots 17% from three. Broden Kapke stands about 6'11", and he's actually been pretty much our best three-point shooter. He's been able to shoot about 35% from three. He supplies the team with 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, just under a block per contest. It's a Boston College team that, while the percentages that teams shoot are very low, they don't generate any turnovers. They're outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and to the credit of Boston College, they're a team that really doesn't turn the ball over. They are a top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. On offense, you've got a Moyne team that they have had a tough time being able to take care of the ball. They are outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but with the way that this Boston College team really doesn't force the issue, I do think that that's going to help them out, and I do think that you get an under here, because I do think that Boston College is going to be able to enact their slow play, and with Moyne, I think that there's a bit of regression with their three-point shooting, but I just don't think that Boston College knocks down their shots, so set my line at 13. At the 13.5, we'll take the points with Moyne, and I'm in on the under. 306-553, 306-554, 4. Colgate plays us at Harvard, and the smart kids of Harvard find themselves as an underdog here of 3.5 points. Total on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 140.5 to a 141.5. This opened up at a 143. I did set my total at a 140.5, so 141 or less. That is my buy point on the under. You've got a Colgate team that's just really not looking to push tempo, and frankly, neither of these teams are. Colgate is 234th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Harvard is 352nd, and Harvard is outside the top 285 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Colgate outside the top 330, so not a lot of second, third chances to be had. You are going to get clean possessions. Colgate outside the top 280 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I did make them the favorite of 4.5 points. Going to be willing to lay because I also do think that they've got the most versatile player in this game. Jalen Cox, 15.5 points, 5.5 assists, 2 steals per contest. Shoots 43% for 3. And Kyle Carlissimo now shooting 43% from the outside, as well as a matter of fact, for Colgate, out of your top 5 scorers, 3 of them shoot at least 42.9% from 3. You've got Alex Alcansenko along with Sam Wright, who have been able to combine for 9 rebounds per game. Between the two of them, you've also been able to get darn near 28 points per game. And you do have a Harvard team that is very well put together in terms of their overall chemistry, as you've got a lot of guys that played with each other last year. Robert Hinton, Tay Barber, Chandler Piggy, they all returned from the season going. Piggy, probably the most versatile player for this team, 11.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's right now shooting only about 30% from 3-point, but chips in there a steal and a half per game as well. Robert Hinton, he's been rough with his 3-point shooting at 23.5%, but I mean, the team as a whole still shoots 35% from 3, despite the top scorer in Hinton give you 16.5 points on only about 24% 3-point shooting. But Tay Barber, he shoots 41% from 3, and Thomas Beatties, he's been able to shoot 52% from 3. I think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there, and for Harvard, if they can find a way to get to the free throw line, bottom 50 team in terms of free throws per possession, but they shoot 78.5% at the charity stripe there. But this is a Colgate team that has won the best in all of college basketball, keeping you from getting to the free throw line as well. So I do think that plays in Colgate's advantage. And additionally, you've got a Harvard team that has been outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that's just enough for Colgate to get the job done in a little bit more of a slow and controlled game. Set my line at 4.5, willing to lay with Colgate, and at a 141 or higher, I'm in on the under. 36.555, 36.556. Georgia Tech plays us a Florida A&M. A&M finds themselves as an underdog of 18 to 18.5 points. 148.5 is the total, and I do like the under. I set my total 143.5. Now you have a Florida A&M team that it ranks 33rd in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. That said, this is a Florida A&M team that has slowed down by about 8 possessions per game over their last 3 games against Division I competition, and they are second worst in all of college basketball, actually third worst now in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis away from home. They were dead last at one point, but they looked a little bit better in their most recent game, where it was a bit of a butt kicking against CCU, but they held in there in the first half, so yay verily there. And you do have a lot of guys that are giving you between 9 and 11 points per game. Jordan Chapman, Antonio Baker, Tyler Shirley, Alon Jaquan Sanders are all there. You just don't have a lot from the outside. For Florida A&M, they're shooting 31.5% from 3 outside the top 275 in all of college basketball. Outside the top 3 are, with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, they're getting blasted on the glass. Florida A&M, right now, they are outside the top 345 in terms of their rebound percentage, but I am going to be willing to take the points here because Georgia Tech has been a sloppy offense as well. They're outside the top 230 in terms of their points scored on a per possession basis. Now, they've looked a little bit better recently. They were able to put up 87 points against Marist and then 95 against Lafayette. Those are lesser teams, though, as well. And you've been dealing with the injury to Bay and Ndongo, a nice double-figure score. They will give you 12 points, 8+ rebounds per game. Mohamed Siala, 8 rebounds per game. He should be able to dominate this game down low for Georgia Tech, but they shoot about 67.5% of the free throw line. This is a Florida A&M team that will put you on the free throw line for Georgia Tech. They're also outside the top 275 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Kwasi Reeves has been that main guy from the outside, shooting about 41% from 3, 16 points per game. And Lamar Washington, good versatility, 11 points, 6 boards, a little bit over a steal, shoots 39% from 3. And Georgia Tech, for what they do leave to be desired on the offensive side of things, this has been a very good defense. They have been a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And it is a Georgia Tech team that, while their forte may not be generating turnovers, this has been a team that has been pretty rock solid in terms of being able to generate turnovers, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They are checking in the top 175 in all of college basketball. That should be more than enough against the Florida A&M team that's had a tough time taking care of the ball. But I just don't know if this Georgia Tech offense is going to be able to do just enough to be able to keep you in this game, to be able to get that cover, because it has been very suspect all season long. And I do think that both of these teams are looking to slow down just a little bit. So semi-total 143.5. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under, and at 18 plus, set my line at 17.5. Going to be willing to take the points with Florida A&M. 36.557, 36.558. Norfolk St is on the road against Louisiana. Louisiana is a 1.5 point favorite. Total on this game 129.5. Set Norfolk St is a 4.5 point favorite. I like them outright on the money line. This is a Norfolk State unit that certainly has had their struggles on offense. They're about 325th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Louisiana, bottom 10 team in terms of points per possession, and really ever since they lost their Oklahoma State transfer in Jamarian Keller, who had 34 points in the first 2 games of the season, it's been very much lost in the sauce for the entirety of this offense. You do now have Jackson Oliveira shooting about 37.5% from 3, 12.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. He's been able to do a rock solid job, but this team just can't develop good, clean offense. Right now, they're outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, and Louisiana, one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Louisiana outside the top 350 in terms of total possessions per game, to be exact. Currently, they're checking in 359th, and Norfolk State, they're a controlled team, but they're not like a slug, 226th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and with Louisiana having some big-time issues with regards to outside shooting just 30% for 3 outside the top 3, and with that regard, it makes it all the bigger that Norfolk State has been a top 60 team with regards to their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Now, they do allow quite a few open looks from 3, but you do have 2 nice guards, and Anthony McComb, Elijah Jamison, were combining for about 32 points per game between the two of them. They shoot about 37.5% from 3-point range. Norfolk State has been outside the top 2 in terms of their ball security with about 12 turnovers per game, and they're just not good on the free throw line. This team is outside the top 330 with their free throw shooting percentage at 64.7%, and with Louisiana, they are right there with them. They are shooting about 66.3% at the free throw line. So if we're looking for an advantage/disadvantage error in this pick'em game, well, both of these teams stink when they're at the free throw line, but for Norfolk State, I think that they're going to do a better job of being able to generate some second and third chances. Louisiana, well outside the top 3 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Norfolk State more around about country average. With Norfolk State, you've been able to get about 4.5 boards, 7 points per game out of Devon Ellis, who comes in from Maryland Eastern Shore. You've been able to get about 4 rebounds out of Keontae Lewis, who knows about good defense. He was over at Wagner the last few seasons. Norfolk State, not quite the same team at generating turnovers that they've been in the past, but a top 225 team with this regard as well. They've been giving up quite a bit with teams being able to go bombs away from 3-point range as well, but I do think that in the end, this Norfolk State team is able to do just enough to be able to find a way to be able to get the job done. I do think that with Norfolk State having a nice advantage on the glass and this Louisiana team just being all out of sorts with regards to their offense, their star freshman has not been able to step up, as Joshua Lewis has only been able to give you about 6.5 points per game. You don't have a single guy on the roster that's right now giving you over 5 rebounds per game. I do think that Norfolk State wins from within in a game that's going to be incredibly sloppy. I said Norfolk State is a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I do like the under. I set my total at a 126.5, and wrap things up with 306.559, 306.560. Richmond is going to be playing against the Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern is a underdog of 13.5 points. So on this game, it is 154.5 to 155.5, and I do like Richmond in this spot. I did set them as a 14.5 point favorite. With Charleston Southern, this has been a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The big thing with Charleston Southern, though, is that they are just generating no turnovers whatsoever. Charleston Southern, a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and that's going to allow this Richmond team, who has been very efficient on offense, to be all the more efficient. And I do think that Richmond is going to be able to do a great job on the glass as well. You've had Jonathan Beagle, the Albany transfer, be able to come in and not be much of a scorer with only about 7.5 points per game, but it gives you 6 boards, he gives you a pair of assists per game, so a versatile big man that's able to impact the game in a wide variety of ways. You've had Will Johnson, Jaden Daughtry combined for about 20 points per game. Daughtry shooting 43% for 3 throws in their 4 boards and a steal per contest. Johnson has been able to give you a bit of facilitation with about 2.3 assists per game, and for this Richmond team, they really don't have that one primary point guard, but they've still been a top 175 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Richmond has also upped their tempo as well. They're now a top 100 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you do have a Charleston Southern team that they're looking to play quite fast as well. They're currently up to 38th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I did set a total here of a 152.5, though. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under as this opened up at a 151 and now has been driven northward. As for this Richmond team, they just don't allow a lot of second and third chances. They've been a top 55 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they're also a top 75 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Teams are only shooting about 30% from the outside against them. For Charleston Southern, I actually love what I've seen out of Bryson Blaine. 18 points, 4 assists, 7.5 rebounds per game. He's come up from the non-D1 ranks, and he's been great. And Alan Sumler, coming off of injury from a season ago, 14 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. These guys have been able to do a very rock-solid job there. And then Luke Williams, about 5.5 assists per game. This is a Charleston Southern team, though, that gets a little bit sloppy with the ball outside the top 200 in terms of ball security, with about 13 turnovers per game. Charleston Southern has been a top 200 team with regards to rebound percentage, but I mean, this is a team that they very much do rely upon the 3. For Charleston Southern, they lead the country in terms of 3-point attempts per game if you include games against non-Division I teams as well. They don't get to the free throw line a ton, and with the way that Richmond has been able to guard the 3-point arc, I do think that Richmond keeps the total under and gets the job done. Willing to lay up to 14 with Richmond, and I do like the under semi-total 152.5, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.